If you look at the the syllabus of the ancient history or the medieval history, most of it is dominated by that overall it is modern history, which is relatively more important from the perspective of prelims if you do previous year's analysis. If you talk about the modern Indian history, तो modern Indian history में source wise what you call as Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, Bipin Chandra, it is there. Why China was able to be politically independent whereas India was politically colonized? One reason was so myself Himanshu Khatri, and some of you are already students, right? So आपके लिए तो पता नहीं कुछ नया होगा या नहीं होगा, right? So anyways, we'll look at the PPT part. So basically how to focus upon the 2-3 aspects are there. One is the conceptual aspect, which I already explained to my students, right? So the whole thought process is that first of all we should know that what exam that we are preparing for. ठीक है, तो फालतू को ज्ञान नहीं दूंगा. Simple point is there's something called sovereignty, right? How do you define sovereignty? One is symbolic sovereign, who is powerless. This is a modern state structure in a way. And then there is what you call as, below you have 3 organs, that is LEJ, legislative, executive, judiciary, right? What is executive? It is equal to ministers, and under that ministers and servants. Servants are of 2 kinds. One are civil servants and second are military servants, right? So you are basically preparing for this civil services, right? So therefore you are trying to get into the executive branch of the state, right? And therefore, for example, if you are applying in an organization, right, and you want to become its member, so therefore your primary focus should be to know about the history of that particular, that particular organization or the similar organization, right? So why do you have post-independence India, right? Because you want to study about the history of the state which is established after the independence, right? And similarly, what do you majorly study in your what you call as your ancient, your medieval, right, history? Your primary focus is to study about the history of the states, right? That's your primary focus which is there, right? So accordingly, most of your UPSC syllabus, it is dominated by the history of the different states which have ruled our territory and our people, right? So therefore, for example, if you look at the the syllabus of the ancient history or the medieval history, most of it is dominated by the different states which have ruled the territory and its people, right? So that is why you study about Cholas, right? Because Cholas, it was a kingdom, it was a state, right? And secondary focus, or the second focus which comes to it, is about people, because state is an organization that rules a territory and its people. That is how you define the state, okay? And therefore some part of the UPSC syllabus, either as a proper subject like art and culture, right, or within the subject, for example, when you study about inflation within economics, that is basically for the common people, from the perspective of the common people.
Studying 8 hours a day and still not sure if it's working? You are not alone. Hard work is important. But in UPSC, effort without direction is burnout without results. This exam doesn't just reward effort, it rewards clarity, strategy, structure. Everything you need for UPSC success starts with the GS Foundation course at Vision IAS Delhi. Full coverage from prelims to mains, CSAT and essay. PT 365 and Mains 365. Current affairs simplified. One-on-one mentorship to work on your weakness. Regular test and feedback to convert effort into result. Toppers like AIR 2 and AIR 3 didn't just work harder, they work smarter. With the right guidance from day 1. Batches starting from 30th June at 8 am, 8 July at 11 am, 15th July at 8 am, 18th July at 5 pm. 22nd July at 11 am, 25 July at 2 pm, 30 July at 8 am at Karol Bagh, and 23rd June at 5 pm, 10 July at 8 am, and 29 July at 6 pm at GTB Nagar. To know more or register, visit our website. Do you think you know UPSC Prelims? It's time to prove it. The UPSC Prelims isn't just a test of memory. It's a test of strategy, instinct, and pattern recognition. And every topper knows the secret weapon is the PYQs. Now, it's your turn to unlock that edge. Vision IAS presents masterclasses on UPSC Prelims PYQs starting from 25th June at 2 p.m. Available both offline and online, this dedicated course in 20 days covers 13 years of PYQs with one mission: your selection. This isn't just revision, it's a tactical upgrade. Here's what you'll master: topic-wise PYQ analysis, polity, economy, history, science and technology, and more. Elimination and logical guessing techniques, difficulty and source mapping, nature-based tagging, fundamental, applied, current-based. Smart revision strategy plus personalized mentoring. What makes this different? You won't just study questions, you'll deconstruct them. You'll learn to read patterns, anticipate traps, and eliminate options like a pro. Register now on our website or call us on the given numbers.
Right? So therefore, these are the two primary focuses, that is the state, right, and the people. So for example, in economics, when you study about budget, budget is a statement of income and expenditure, but whose income and whose expenditure? It is state's income and state expenditure, right? So therefore, you are studying about the state, right? Monetary policy, it is decided by the state, right? So therefore, you in history also, be it ancient, medieval, modern, two primary focuses are there. 75% focus, it is on the history of the states. Why? To learn from their mistakes and to learn from their successes, right? So as I say, so that the first time in the history of India it has happened that the people of India, they have established their own state, right, on 26th of January 1950. So this particular state, it should not fail, right? So therefore, that is why you try to learn that what were the achievements of that particular state or that particular kingdom, right, and what were the weaknesses, right? So is perspective say we should be studying what you call as modern Indian history, ancient, medieval, etc., right? When it comes to, for example, sources, so when you look at the sources, so the sources for ancient, medieval, modern are pretty straightforward, right? Before the sources, you can take a look at it, that overall it is modern history which is relatively more important from the perspective of prelims if you do previous year's analysis, right? That's there, but every question is important. See, if you look at the ancient history, it is majorly focused on what? Society and state. So therefore, have a keen eye on the syllabus. Society, it represents the life of the people, and state, which I told you, right? And accordingly, Vedic period, Mahajanpata is a powerful kingdom which existed. So therefore, it is a kind of state which is there. Then you study about the Mauryan Empire. Empire is what? Empire is a basically summation of kingdoms. That is a larger state, right? So again, it is just another state. Gupta Empire, another state. Harsha dynasty. When do you use the word dynasty? When the head of the state, it is decided by bloodline, that is when you use the word dynasty, right? So therefore, again, you are studying about, you can call it Harsha Empire also, no problem, right? And propagation of Buddhism and Jainism, that impacts the life of the people, because common man does not want to be MP, MLA minister. Common man wants economic security, physical security, socio-cultural security, socio-cultural, right? So therefore, religion is part of that socio-cultural, right? So therefore, your focus is on what impacts the life of the people and what impacts the life of the state, right? And then you have South Indian kingdoms, that is nothing but South Indian states, right? The prominent ones, right? Sources wise, sources are pretty clear actually. If you want to go into much detail, so therefore, daughter of what you call as ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, right? She has written a book. So that is like one of the things, but वो काफी बड़ा हो जाता है. Otherwise, primarily if you focus on what you call as the visionized material, right? And the ancient Indian NCRT, and Tamil Nadu NCRT does a very good job with respect to ancient. Current affairs should be given a lot more focus with respect to ancient, right? Because which particular aspects are highlighted, right? So therefore, that will make a particular part of the syllabus more prominent or relatively less prominent, right? Things like that, right? Similarly, medieval may, again, it is the same repeat telecast. Again, you study about history of the state, that the different states which ruled, what was their structure like. Why? Because you would require that knowledge to design a modern state. Should we simply ape the West? Or there can be certain features from the previous states which existed in India jahan se we can borrow something positive or some, and prevent something which is negative, right? So therefore accordingly you see ascent and decline of dynasties like Delhi Sultanate, Vijayanagar Empire. Why you're focusing on ascent and decline? So that this particular nation state which got created on 26th of January 1950, it should not decline, right? So what were the reasons of the declines of the previous states? What are the reasons for the decline of, what reason for rise of new states, right? So therefore accordingly you focus upon that, right? Vijayanagar Empire, another state, Bahmani Sultanate, right? Bahmani kingdoms, they were in, Deccan area, right? So fine. Mughal Empire, Babur after the first battle of Panipat 1526, right? So until what you call as the establishment of the Mughal Empire part, it is part of the medieval, right? The modern Indian history syllabus, it begins from the decline of the Mughal state, right? So this is how historians have chosen like a line for that, right? And then you talk about socio-cultural transformation. Again, you notice a clear classification is there between the state and the people, right? So therefore this knowledge is very, very important for current affairs also. All of us are into reading newspapers. So which particular news items are more important? Which particular news items are less important, right? So accordingly, we should focus on. So religious movements, literature. Why? Because, for example, if you want to understand life of people of any country today also, for example, if you want to know how people in France live, right? So therefore what you would do, you would pick up certain novels, right? Whereby certain stories are there, right? Stories with characters which are based on some real people, right? Therefore it is literature through which you come to know about the life of the people, right? About their desires, about their achievements, about their failures, right? That is the rationale that why you have this literature thing, that's Sangam literature, right? So what was in the Sangam literature is much more important compared to the structural part of it, that these many volumes were there, or this was there, that was there, right? So therefore try to get into the the intelligent aspect, the conceptual aspect of it, right? So therefore that becomes more important, right? For example, in the ancient, people talk about, for example, in prelims they will ask a question that, okay, this particular kind of a idol, right, it was made of bronze or it was made of something. So how does it matter that whether it was made of bronze or it was made of pig iron or something? How does it matter? Because it tells us about the achievement of that particular civilization, right? That is the reason, right? So हर चीज के पीछे एक रैशनल है, रैशनल समझना बड़ा जरूरी है, अदरवाइज यू विल फील लॉस्ट दैट व्हाई वी आर स्टडिंग दिस, ये पढ़ूँ मैं या ना पढ़ूँ सर, इसमें कौन से पेजेस इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, कौन से पेजेस को मैं कम इंपॉर्टेंस दूँ. सो दैट्स व्हाई द रैशनल बिकम्स इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? And similarly in art and culture, so it is totally dedicated to the life of the people, right? I'm not an expert in art and culture, I'll be very, very frank with you, right? So my domain is what you call as world history, modern history and post-independence India, internal security, etc. But otherwise here also it is focuses again diverse cultural heritage, that it is about clearly a separate subject has been carved out with the society and art and culture. These are two subjects which are primarily dedicated to the life of the people, right? So therefore that is the thought process here. Art, dance, bhakti, literature, right? And that's why at times student feels that sir ancient ka jo syllabus hai, it looks very, very similar to the syllabus of the art and culture, right? What is the reason for that? Reason for, and what is how to divide it then? So when you're studying ancient, let's say aapne decide kiya that you are going to revise ancient, focus more on the state aspect of things. Why? Because the art and culture mein aap people aspect to cover kar hi lenge, right? So therefore that is how the thing it is there, right? नितिन सिंघानिया ने कहते हैं काफ़ी अच्छा किताब लिखा हुआ है, ठीक है? So that is one of the source. Otherwise Vision IAS has also very good source, right? Then if you talk about the modern Indian history, तो modern Indian history में source wise what you call as Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, Bipin Chandra, it is there, right? Spectrum I do not subscribe to, ठीक है? I hate Spectrum because it is a book without any integrity. It says brief history of India and it is this big, right? So therefore my students know how I hate Spectrum, right? ऐसा. तो खैर with respect to the modern Indian history, so for example certain principles are there. What is the syllabus like? The syllabus, it begins like this: decline of Mughal state. The decline begins in 1707 and that is where our syllabus begins, right? Now it is in the nature of the power to centralize itself in strong personality, but once that personality will weaken, then power will leave it. Either it will leave it vertically downwards or it will leave it or via horizontal replacement, right? For example, the example which I give is of our family, right? For example, there was a time when the grandfather or the grandmother, they were very, very strong personality, physically also powerful, mentally also very, very alert, right? So therefore they used to centralize power. Whatever they will say, that will be done in the whole household. But as they become old, as a result, power moves down to your father, to your mother, to your aunts, to your uncles, right? So therefore it is a natural thing that power will decentralize itself into smaller units of power, right? And that is what happened in the case of the Indian scenario also. When there was decline of the Mughal state, why? Because weak personalities, they became emperors, plus economic profile of the Mughal state, that is what was the amount of money in the bank account of the Mughal state, that also declined because of continuous wars by Aurangzeb, who was the last strong emperor. And certain other socio-religious policies of Aurangzeb, they were also not liked by the people. And as a result, there was a rise of regional states. Right? Regional states, they are further divided into successor states, rebel states. Rebel states were formed by fighting against the Mughals, and already autonomous states. Already autonomous states means that even when the Mughal Empire was extremely powerful, even then the Mughal Emperor was not making laws or implementing them through his officials at the grassroots level, right? So already autonomous states, they include Rajputs, right? Because they were militarily very, very powerful. So Mughals, they could not properly ever dominate them. Second is Travancore, and third is Mysore. That is because of distance. Mysore is present-day Karnataka, and Travancore is present-day Kerala, very far away from Delhi, right? So therefore, you can think of the power of any state. Imagine a bulb in a dark room, and the bulb is placed in the capital. The farther you go from the capital, which is your main center of power, weaker the intensity of the light will be, right? So therefore, you can think something like this. Okay. So therefore, in Travancore and in the case of Mysore, that was the case. Rebel states who fought against the Mughals, number one were Marathas. Number two, you can say Sikh state, right? Number three, Jat kingdom was there. Number fourth, Afghan kingdoms were there, right? That is your Farrukhabad and Rohilkhand, right? So therefore, they were the kingdoms. And successor states mein Bengal, Awadh and Hyderabad was there, right? Why they are called successor states? Because these states were set up by certain Mughal officials only, right? So they are like stabbing the Mughal emperor in the back, that in this territory of Bengal, in this territory of Awadh, in this territory of Hyderabad, you will not do shasan, you will not do ruling. What will happen? Whatever we want, that will happen, right? So therefore, these are like regional states which are there. But it is in the nature of the power to centralize itself in strong personality. So some of them can show that strong personality, and it was Marathas who showed the strongest personality. And they started rising, and they started developing a Maratha empire. However, just before they could establish an all India level state, Third Battle of Panipat 1761 happened. And therefore, what existed in India when the Britishers, they started doing their empire building, that there was no one central power, and there was what you call as multiple regional states. How does it impact? When there is no one central government, then all the resources of that territory and its people, they are not acting in one direction. They are not united. And this is how actually there was a rise of company state, or rise of East India Company, whereby it did not establish an empire in India right away, but one by one by one by one, it took away territory from these regional states. And by 1857, it had 63% territory of India, where 78% of population of India lived. And this is taking 100 years. That is from 1757 till 1857. Our syllabus is still 1947 in the case of modern Indian history. And that is why the names of the books is from Plassey, which took place, Battle of Plassey took place in 1757, to partition, right? So therefore, these 100 years, we are ruled by a company, right? And the next 90 years, we are ruled by the British state, which rules the territory of Britain and its people, right? So therefore, rise of East India Company is there, and then the British state, right, ruled us from 1858 till 1947. Okay. Now, the rule of the Britishers, common man does not want to be MP, MLA minister. Common man wants economic security, physical security, socio-cultural security. But if these securities are not provided, then the common man reacts, right? So then we come towards the people, that how, when we talk about rise of East India Company, at that point of time, we talk about different wars, Anglo-Maratha wars, right? Anglo-Mysore wars and all of that. Now we talk about people, that is reaction by people or response of people. And when we talk about response of people, initially the response came in the form of revolts. So here we discuss peasant revolts, tribal revolts, right? Aisa. You people who were Western educated, you people gave a response in a different manner initially, because you people were brown sahibs, you believed that the British rule is good for India, right? So therefore your response was social reforms. The Britishers used to say that you are not good enough, your society is weak, so therefore you responded in the form of social reforms. However, soon the belief that the British rule is good for India, it withered away. And then these very same people who were earlier just social reformers, not one person, but like the class of people who were earlier social reformers, right, they soon realized that the Britishers, they are not having any intention of doing economic development of India, of doing political development of India to move it towards democracy. They are here to loot us. And it is then that you people, right, you started modern politics. When these people or common people were revolting, their method was simply violence. They simply wanted the Britishers to be out. What after that? They did not have any vision for that. Whereas you people, that is the Western educated middle class section of the society, you had a vision. You had studied about American Revolution, you had studied about French Revolution, you had studied about Enlightenment ideas, right? So therefore you people had a vision, and therefore you people began what you call as modern Indian national movement, which began from 1857 and it is continuing till 1947, right? Here also, initially, pen came out. That is, you people were very, you people followed constitutional methods, right? And therefore, it is the moderates section of the society or moderates among you who are basically intellectual people. They are writing letters, they are writing petitions, right? And they follow only very legal kind of methods. However, the pen failed. When the pen failed, then people came out. People came out in the sense that extremist leaders, Lal Bal Pal Shri Aurobindo, these kind of leaders who relied upon the action by the masses on the ground in the form of non-cooperation, civil disobedience, right? So therefore these people, they tried, right? However, they also failed. Around the time period of 1910, they failed, right? And simultaneously, guns also came out, right? That is, revolutionaries, they came out, right, from 1907 onwards, and they make supreme sacrifice, but they fail because armed forces, they are not rebelling. Armed forces are loyal to the British, right? And that's why, and they have this, they have banned arms also. There's this Arms Act 1878 which took away guns from the people of India, right? And then when all of these failed, then from 1920 onwards began Mahatma Gandhi's era. And he, with his method, unique method of non-violent satyagrah, right, he was able to bring the different sections of the society into the Indian national movement. And gradually through his movements like Rowlatt Satyagraha of 1919, then non-cooperation movement of 1920, then civil disobedience movement of 1930-34, and finally the Quit India movement of 1942-45, right, in a gradual step-by-step manner with escalating action against the Britishers. Ultimately, by 1947, we are able to have independence. But around that point of time, guns had again come out in the form of INA. That is ultimately the revolutionaries branch, right? So Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose like leaders, they have a foot in the extremist section also. They have a foot in the revolutionary section. Ultimately, these people, they were able to, cause a mutiny in the army, which is Azad Hind Fauj, right? So once army is no more loyal to the British, once the people are also very, very strengthened against the British, so therefore ultimately we have what? Ultimately we have the revolt, right? Revolt in the sense that is the overthrow of the Britishers, right? However, sadly, it was not just this thing, but simultaneously we also moved towards partition, right? So therefore this is how you should make an understanding of the syllabus, right? And that is actually the syllabus, but in a thematic format. So your syllabus can be broadly classified into this, you can say, is part number 1, right? Establishment of the British Empire is part number 2, and then this is the third part. So broadly, the syllabus of modern Indian history is divided into 3 sections, right? And more number of questions in the prelims, questions they can come from any branch, right? But what gets dominated in the mains exam is basically the point number 3. Point number 3, right? Until what you call as couple of years back, UPSC never asked question in the mains from this section. But couple of years back, UPSC has now started asking questions from number 2 also in the mains, right? It asked that despite numerous armies of India, how the English East India Company armies, they were able to establish an empire in India. So therefore, that particular question comes from the rise of the English East India Company, right? So therefore, that is the focus, right? So this is syllabus source-wise. Well, frankly, simple NCERT, etc. They do not work, right? Vision IAS has recently come out with 3 books, right, which are very good, right? Very good replacement of Spectrum. So if you focus upon that and NCERT, and that's there. And just in case if you are my student, then you don't have to like look at anywhere else. I provide handouts, right? Handouts which are self-written actually. So basically, I studied, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, Bipin Chandra, everything I studied, and in a very simple language, whatever could be brought together at one place, right, to the best of my knowledge and effort. So therefore, those who have been my students or who will be my students, so therefore, there you focus upon the handouts which are there, right? So otherwise, source-wise, it is there, right? Next aspect is what you call as world history, right? So when you talk about world history at times UPSC ask only one question, but last year it asked a couple of questions, which can become very, very important with respect to your rank, because after every one rank things change, right? So there the history actually begins from what you call as, there are 2 streams of thoughts, right? One stream of thought is what you call as political, right? And one stream of thought is broadly, it can be divided into political, right? Second, it can be what you call as ideological. Third aspect is economic aspects, which become important. And last aspect is people's aspect, which becomes important, right? Ideology is like the part in modern Indian history also. For example, UPSC is asked that what were the difference between Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore with respect to their approach towards nationalism and education, right? So that ideological thing can be there as well, right? So like a country has a state, the world has super states, that is superpowers, right? So the world history is about rise and fall of superpowers, largely that is what it is about, right? So for example, let me give you a monologue, right? Let me give you a monologue. So how things were. So things were like this, that our syllabus is broadly like a कर सकते हैं ऐसे, मतलब वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री को इंटरेस्टिंग बनाने के लिए, ठीक है? तो the history begins that in the ancient times there were certain traditional trade routes which were there, right? And Europe was totally dependent upon Asia for import of finished goods. Industrial revolution has not yet taken place, but there was this rivalry between Ottoman Empire, based out from Turkey, and between the Christian world. That rivalry ultimately manifested in the form of that in 1453. In 1453, the traditional trade routes to the east, they were blockaded by the Ottoman Empire. And as a result, what will happen? Some kind of hyperinflation will take place in Europe, right? Therefore, they ventured out into the oceans. They knew that by that point of time that the earth is round. And they thought that from northwest, they can find a new trade route to the east. While they were doing so, they forgot to turn, for example, and therefore they discovered a new route, or they discovered what you call as existence of a new continent called America. Initially, they thought that these people are basically Indians, and that's how the indigenous people of North America, Central America, they are called American Indians, right? That was Columbus, 1492. However, 1498, Vasco da Gama was able to reach India, Calicut, and therefore this is how they have established new trade routes, right? This is how the discipline of geography also develops, right? This is how they are able to understand the different geographical aspects with respect to this thing. However, what was their primary purpose to come to these new lands? Their primary purpose to come to these new lands was basically trade, money. They wanted the goods. So the whole thing is that they will purchase the goods at lower price, and they will be selling the goods at higher price back in Europe. Okay. Now, if I want money or wealth from you, but if I have a gun in my hand, right, will I not be able to take those goods for free? So therefore, when these people, they reached Americas, they found that the political states which are ruling Americas, they are not very strong, right? And therefore it was an opportunity, and therefore began early colonialism, right? Colonialism as well as decolonization, it happened in two phases, right? So this is the first phase of colonialism, right? Whereby they will try to establish their power over the lands of the Americas so that they are able to loot wealth. They are able to do drain of wealth better from the Americas, right? But when these people, they reached India, they reached China, they found that in India, strong state is there in the form of, let's say, Mughal state. Because when the Portuguese are reaching in India, so उस point of time तक तो Mughals नहीं आए हैं, but still relatively stronger states were present in India, right, around the time period of 1498. Therefore, these people restricted themselves to purchasing goods from India. They were very good at naval power. That's how they are able to travel so far. So therefore, these people, they dominated the oceans, while the lands of India, lands of China, they were dominated by the indigenous powers. However, as modern Indian history in case of India as well as in the case of China progressed, it happened that the central authority, it weakened, right? In the case of India, so they were rise of regional states, right? And that division of the Indian states provided Britishers opportunity also. And obviously that fact that if you have gun in your hand, then you'll be able to loot. And if you're able to establish a state over some territory of India, then you can have multiple incomes. That is not just trade income, but also taxation income, right? You see the monetary motive which was there behind the establishment of empires, right? Because it is about money that they have come here. And therefore, in India, we study in modern Indian history how they established their empire. In the case of China, even though China was economically very, very rich, but militarily, it was not that powerful. But still, because there was one single power, why China was able to be politically independent, whereas India was politically colonized? One reason was distance, right? That is, China is farther away from India, and therefore, if you have to fight wars in China, then much more money is required. Second issue is neighborhood. In the case of China, some strong powers are present. In the north of China, there is Russia, and therefore China is Russia's backyard. If you as a European power is going to try to colonize China, will Russia allow that? No, it won't. It would resist. And well, after 1860s, Japan started industrializing. So therefore, Japan, although small in size, was an industrial power from 1868 onwards. So therefore, presence of strong powers in the neighborhood would act as a speed breaker for the European powers with respect to politically establishing their dominant control over China. But if you look at the neighborhood of India, in the north you have weak China. On the right hand side you have weak Burma. Southeast Asia is also weak. On the left hand side you have Afghanistan, which is weak. Persia, which is weak. Right? As a result, see, there is no regional competitor to the British ambitions of establishing empire in India once the Indian powers are weak. Right? Next reason is, even though the government in China was relatively weak as industrial revolution of the Britishers progressed after 1750 onwards, still there was one central power. And existence of that one central power, although not industrialized, it will be very costly for you to basically bring the whole China under your control, because जो भी resources हैं, non-industrialized resources हैं, but they are acting under one command. That is command of Manchu dynasty, which ruled China from 1644 till 1911. Right? That's why colonialism in Americas began early, from 1500s. But colonialism in India has to wait till 1757. And colonialism in China has to wait till First Opium War, 1840. Right? So therefore, this is how colonialism took place in phases in Americas, in India, in the case of China. And in the case of Africa, it began properly, it began in 1870. Although in the previous times also, the coastal areas of Africa had come under colonialism after 1500s. ऐसा क्यों भाई? Did Africa have very strong kingdoms? No. Geography of Africa was so dense, so complex, right, that it acted as a big impediment, right, for the Europeans to establish their empire. Africa was called Dark Continent. right? Until mid 19th century, it was called dark continent. Dark not because blacks are there, dark because lack of knowledge of the internal geography of Africa, right? It was ultimately when some explorers, they proved that no African rivers are navigable, etc. And then from 1870 onwards, this, colonialism began, right? So therefore, this is broad theme about colonialism. That is what we study in world history. We try to study about colonialism in Africa. We try to study about colonialism in China, right? These are the two main themes which are there, right? Then second thing that comes into operation is that so what were the motivation behind this early colonialism? 3G: God, glory, gold, right? Gold represented the trade. Glory was desired by the kings of Europe who wanted an empire, and God, that is spread of Christianity, was a motivation because society was deeply religious. So therefore, it was considered God's work, right, to spread Christianity, right? So therefore, these three motivations were there, and therefore, the people of Americas, people of Africa, people of India, people of China, they witnessed not just economic colonialism but also political colonialism and as well as cultural colonialism, right? So therefore, this is what is happening. We also discuss about the slave trade which was there, right? That is, so abhi industrial revolution to hua nahi hai. Industrial revolution will begin in England from 1750. So therefore, it was the plantation systems, right, which acted as factories of that era. Now in the plantation system, they are like the factories of agriculture sector. That is when you do very large, farming and all. There you require labor, and therefore you kidnap the black people from West Africa. You transport them across the Atlantic. You sell them to planters, and the balance you take to Europe. And therefore, this is how between Europe, Africa, that is West Africa, and Central Americas and South North America, this triangular slave trade existed for 300 years. That is roughly from 1500 till 1800, right? Aisa, right? So therefore, that is 1500 to 1800, 350 years or so. So this slave trade we also discuss, right? So we cover the early colonialism. Then we have to move towards economic aspect. Economic aspect may, it is what you call as your industrial revolution, right? So industrial revolution, we discuss why industrial revolution happened first in England, right? Why and when it happened in rest of the world, right? So all of those aspects we discuss about industrial revolution. And industrial revolution के जो impacts हैं वहाँ से भी UPSC asks a lot of questions. Okay, so industrial revolution not just made Britain the economic superpower, but it also made it's a very strong military power. Why? Because if you have done IR, that is industrial revolution, then your military will also be very, very superior, because machine gun is also a machine, right? And therefore we move towards the geopolitics. After discussing the industrial revolution, we move towards the geopolitics. इसमें एक और चीज आ जाती है खैर, geopolitics. तो industrial revolution सबसे पहले हुई इंग्लैंड में, right? And there were certain conditions. One of the very important condition was political stability, right, to do IR. And therefore the reason that US began IR from 1865, because US is achieving political stability in 1865 after the US Civil War, 1861-65. Italy got unified in 1870. Italy started IR after 1870. Germany got unified in 1870, therefore IR after 1870, right? France became a stable republic in 1870. Third Republic was set up, therefore IR happened after 1870. Now why are you doing IR? Because you want your economy to be better, right? You feel left out compared to Britishers. Now, to do industrialization, you require raw materials and export markets. Important raw materials are like, for example, coal, right, or iron, which are present not just in your country, but if you are able to have colonies, then with gun on the hand of the people of, gun on the heads of the people of colony, you will be able to extract cheap raw materials, and you can force them to buy your products, therefore reducing the cost of IR and generating more wealth to do further industrialization. And therefore in 1870 began a race for colonies. This is second phase of colonialism, right, whereby every other power is competing that we need to have colonies, right? And China and Africa, they became the victims of this second phase of colonialism, which was driven by desire of industrialization. Second force was also promoting it, rise of nationalism. with the American Revolution, 1765-83, with the French Revolution, 1789, and then 23 years of wars by Napoleon from 1792, French Revolutionary Wars, right, from 1792 till 1815. It was France fighting like Abhimanyu against all the other European kings. And Napoleon was rising from 1795 onwards. And wherever Napoleon went, there he ended something called feudalism. And opposite of feudalism is nationalism. So therefore, nationalism spread in Europe. Nationalism, nation, we are a great nation. If our nation is to be great, then should we be importers of products? Should we not be industrialized? We should be, right? So therefore, nationalism was another force which was driving this second phase of colonialism. In fact, in the case of Italy, people of Italy pressurized their government. Where is our empire? Why don't we have an empire? Right? So people are putting pressure on their governments that, like Britain, like France, we should also have an empire. Right? So therefore, nationalism plus desire for IR, it led to what you call as Scramble for Africa 1870 and colonialism or loot of China also. Right? But ये लड़ाई इतनी हुई that ultimately these conflicts, they could not be resolved through diplomacy, and they were to be resolved through war, and that is known as World War I, which was fought over colonies, 1914-19. Right? So therefore, this is also another theme that we discuss. Right? Apart from this, coming towards the ideological or the people's part, another theme which becomes important, like UPSC has asked, that American and French Revolution, they laid foundation of modern world. That means they are simply asking, please tell us the positive impacts of positive sustained impacts, जो आज भी दिखते हैं, of American and French Revolution. Right? So therefore, we discuss, American Revolution, French Revolution. Think of democracy like a virus, coronavirus. Britain was the first democracy. Right? From there, the virus spread to United States of America. That is led to establishment of United States of America in North America. Then the virus traveled across the Atlantic and resulted in French Revolution 1789. The virus was further spread to rest of the Europe by Napoleon, who was there till 1815. Right? So therefore, from this particular perspective, we study why American Revolution, consequence of American Revolution, why French Revolution, consequence of French Revolution, right? And then this virus did not just stop here. In fact, the first wave of decolonization, back, it was in early 1800s that countries like Mexico got independence, right? Around 1821. Around 1815, Brazil got independence from Portugal, right? You have this Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia getting independence from Spain, right? So therefore, decolonization did not just begin after World War II, it had begun even after French Revolution 1789. Right? That is the very big impact that is spread of nationalism, not just in Europe, but even in the colonies. Not in all colonies, but in some colonies. Right? So therefore, we study this. And you know why? Logic is very, very simple. Because France was fighting like Abhimanyu against rest of the Europeans. Those rest of the Europeans, like Spain, Portugal, they got weak. When they got weak, it gave more confidence to the people of their colonies to rise against them. So therefore, that's impact of Napoleon also. Decolonization happened not just because of the French Revolution, but more directly because of Napoleon. नेपोलियन के 23 साल के युद्ध नहीं होते तो स्पेन पुर्तगाल वीक नहीं होते, वो वीक नहीं होते तो इंडिपेंडेंस नहीं आती. Right? So from that perspective, world history is very logical, very, very interesting. Everything is interconnected. Right? Now, this is how we move towards, we cover all of these things. Right? And then we, reach till World War I. Once we reach towards World War I, and then we discuss the consequences of the World War I. So UPSC can ask such questions that the World War I laid the foundation of the World War II, because the peace treaties which were signed after the World War, right, they were very, very what you call as harsh, right? And as a result, we discuss the inter warriors, that is the period from 1990 till 1939, and उसमें एक major event is Great Depression 1929, right? So there you try to discuss that why this depression took place and how this depression was resolved, and that is why UPSC has asked the tool which resolved the Great Depression. It is known as New Deal. The policies which were adopted by Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933, they are known as New Deal. UPSC has asked a question on New Deal, right? Because it was very big event which impacted the lives of the people, right? So accordingly, uska solution kaise hoga? So it is, so what happens between 1919 till 1939? Multiple things happen. For example, fascism rises in 1922 in Italy. So that brings us to the topic of ideology again. That what are these isms? Fascism, right? Nazism or Hitler, he rose to power by 1933, right? So therefore we discuss fascism, Nazism. Then of course we discuss Great Depression 1929. Very interesting. Actually it was World War I which resulted in fascism, because World War I meant a lot of misery, and the government in Italy was not able to solve the problems, economic problems created by the World War I, right? Therefore, because of World War I, the negatives of the World War I, one force which rose was fascism, but another force which rose was what you call as communism. The Russian Revolution happened in 1917 during the World War I. World War I, in step number 1, led to communism. Now communism is like a religion which wants to spread itself, right? So when is Communist Party of India set up? 1920. When is Communist Party of Italy set up? 1921. When is Communist Party in US set up? Around the same time, right? And when is USSR set up? 1920. And communism believes in end of capitalism, that is no private property, right? And it believes in methods of violence which will create fear in the hearts of the people. And therefore, if there is someone like Mussolini who guarantees protection against communism, so people said, tu hi aaja fir, right? So therefore this communism, this led to rise of fascism, right? Great Depression 1929 was similar in its economic impact like World War I. Therefore, Great Depression 1929 also resulted in further strength to communism, right? Especially in Germany, for example. Again, the same cycle of fear, and therefore rise of Hitler by 1933, right? So one is extreme right-wing ideology, fascism, Nazism. One is extreme left-wing ideology, communism, and this is how it is. बल्कि ये battle अभी की नहीं है. We'll highlight that after French Revolution of 1789, the peasants, they benefited by getting lands of nobility and clergy. You people benefited by getting meritocracy and political power. What about the workers? They did not gain much. And therefore this thought that there should be socialism, this thought, it got generated from the French Revolution 1789. So French Revolution 1789 led to socialism, right? Which in theory by 1848 was converted to communism by Karl Marx, right? And manifestation will take place in 1970s. तो युद्ध जो है सोशलिज्म और कैपिटलिज्म का 1789 के बाद ही स्टार्ट हो गया था. From 1789 there is socialism versus capitalism, right? However, आप ऐसा समझ सकते हैं that I can create a very good future year question. World War I and World War II were ceasefires between war of communism versus capitalism. तो communism और socialism लड़ रहे थे, right? बीच में monarchs, right? So therefore they both came together and in a way defeated monarchs in the World War I. Then they again started fighting. फिर हिटलर आ गया, right? Hitler wants to expand towards Russia also, right, which is communist, and wants to expand towards France also, which is capitalist. So USSR मतलब communism, Britain, US, money capitalism, they came together as part of World War II, and defeated Hitler. And then they looked at each other and they're like, Abe tu, and started fighting Cold War, 1945-91. Right? So 1789 से अगर देखा जाए, then a silent war is going on between capitalism and socialism, and the monarchs of World War I and Hitler of World War II, they are just temporary pause, and the war continues. Or there can be a question, World War II never ended. Full stop. Do you agree? Because Cold War was also fought world over, right? And the superpowers, all important powers were involved, right? So World War तो खत्म ही नहीं हुई ना एक तरीके से, right? So therefore that kind of, this is how we like try to analyze, or this is how you should analyze it, right? Right? So therefore इस तरीके से consequences of the World War, अभी तक UPSC ने, they have not asked any question from the Cold War, right? Which they should, right? I don't know why. Till this point of time, they have reached only till what you call as decolonization and World War II, because actually 3 events, 1914, 1944 minus 1914, कितना हुआ? 30 years. Easy to remember. 3 decades and 3 economic events: World War I, Great Depression, and World War II. Therefore, the colonial powers, they were weakened. The way Napoleon weakened the colonial powers and decolonization happened, similarly the 2 World Wars and Great Depression weakened the colonial powers, and therefore second phase of decolonization happened. Right? So there the UPSC is asked that what were the patterns in decolonization. Right? For example, one UPSC question is that there were many Western educated leaders, right, who led freedom struggles in Africa. ऐसे पूछ लिया, मतलब यहाँ से आप क्वेश्चंस निकाल सकते हो, right? So that is the thought process which is there, right? तो कोल्ड वॉर से अभी तक उन्होंने, they have not asked any question, right? Which they should, because Russia versus Ukraine is taking place. People, they talk about Cold War 2.0, right? So therefore, as a student, at least once one should cover the Cold War part. Although कोई question नहीं पूछा गया है, क्योंकि अगर बाउंसर क्वेश्चन आ गया एक, right, in the mains, right, तो 15 मार्क्स ऐसा होगा. प्रीलिम्स में भी हेल्प हो जाता है. यूपीएससी once asked in prelims, which of the following is common point between Karl Marx and Mahatma Gandhi? Right, तो ठीक है, एक बार अपन को मतलब कर लेना चाहिए, right? So therefore that is what you call as the thought processes, right? तो primary focus should be, अब ये मैंने आपका सेशन लिया how to prepare GS, क्या इससे क्या निकला आपका? अगर मैं सिर्फ सिलेबस बता देता, वो तो ऑनलाइन भी आपके पास अवेलेबल है, राइट? सोर्स बता देता, तो ऑनलाइन आराम से अवेलेबल है, यहाँ पे भी लिखे हुए हैं, वो कुछ नहीं है. टॉपर से भी आप ये गलत सवाल पूछते हो. Whenever any topper talk happens, wrong questions are asked to topper. Sir, which sources? अरे थोड़ा सा मेहनत करो, वो तो सब आराम से अवेलेबल है, तुम टॉपर का टाइम खा जाते हो. लक्ष्मीकांत, you are also reading. लक्ष्मीकांत topper is also reading. You are not getting selected. है ना? तो पॉइंट है कि हाउ टू स्टडी, राइट? एंड हाउ टू स्टडी के अंदर वन इज मैनेजरियल पार्ट, दैट इज हाउ टू मैनेज योर टाइम, right? How to make notes, whether to make short notes in every subject or in certain subjects. And second part is what you call as this method of studying. And what did you notice in world history? What did you notice in modern history? That even if it was syllabus, focus should always be upon the why part of things, the conceptual part of the things. That is much more important than the factual part of the things, right? फोकस शुड बी ऑन इंटरकनेक्शन. नहीं सर वो टॉपर आया था और टॉपर बोला सी देखो मैं इसमें फैक्ट्स भी डाल दूँ, हाँ मैंने ये नहीं कहा दैट फैक्ट्स आर नॉट इम्पॉर्टेंट, बट वेन एवर यू आर गोइंग टू स्टडी विद फोकस ऑन फैक्ट्स फर्स्ट एज स्टेप नंबर 1, you will not be able to focus on the why part of thing. First you understand the why, try to see the interlinkages, and in the second part you try to add facts to your answers or to whatever you have studied, राइट? तब स्टडीज इंटरेस्टिंग भी होंगी. मतलब मुझे तो बड़ा मजा आया अब ये वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री वाला डिस्कस करते हुए, ठीक है ना, बिकॉज लॉजिक है ना हर चीज में, ठीक है ना, ऑल द टाइम वाज लेस, राइट? सो एंड इट्स एफर्टलेस व्हेन यू स्टडी लाइक दिस, राइट? सो फर्स्ट यू हैव टू स्टडी वर्टिकली, see how the process of studying history is, if I limit myself to history or any other subject for that matter. First obviously you have to study vertically, right? That is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. Don't make notes at this point of time. Step number 2 is you have to do second reading. Why? Because this time when you do second reading, while reading chapter number 1, you already have an idea that what is there in chapter number 6. Then analysis begins in second reading. It is then that you are able to see that, okay, how these overall things are connected with each other. When you do the third reading, those things, they become strong. But आपका focus होना चाहिए that I have to link. If in second reading also you are reading only vertically, that is when chapter 2 you are reading, you forget chapter number 1, then there is a problem, right? And it is after the third reading that you should start making short notes, right? So therefore अब student को आता है problem कि सर इतना सारा किताब है, 3 reading per subject में कह रहे हो आप, इसीलिए don't even pick up pencil or highlighter in your first reading. In first reading, have zero expectation from yourself. In the first reading, you read the whole book like a novel, whereby you don't want to understand anything. Your focus is only speed, right? So that you can have, a sense of confidence that, okay, I completed this whole big book in 1 week after classes. Trust me, I've been a student of psychology for 3-4 years because it was my optional. And this was a big problem for me, right? मैंने किताब मंगाई, How to Read Fast, bestseller. एंड उसमें जो लॉजिक दिए हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं साइकोलॉजी में भी थे विद रिस्पेक्ट. उसका ये तरीका था, इन स्टेप नंबर 1 जस्ट रीड विदाउट एनी फोकस. एंड साइकोलॉजी में इन द सबकॉन्शियस, राइट, वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग बन रही होती है, ठीक है, जो कि हमें नहीं लग रहा होता कि बन रही होती, बट बन रही होती है एक्चुअली में. एंड देन व्हेन यू रीड द सेकंड टाइम, देन यू रीड स्लो, राइट. एंड दिस टेक्निक कभी अप्लाई करके देखना, टेस्ट करने का जरूरत तो है. अप्लाई दिस टेक्निक वेयर? ऑन न्यूज़पेपर. इन न्यूज़पेपर, रादर देन रीडिंग एंड मेकिंग नोट्स, एक बार क्विक रीड कर लो आर्टिकल का, एंड फिर सेकंड रीड करो स्लो. आपको डायरेक्ट फर्क पता चलेगा कि हाँ, टाइम उतना ही लगा, बट या शायद कम भी लगे, बट अंडरस्टैंडिंग ज्यादा है. तो वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. 1 रीडिंग एंड नोट्स टेक्स मोर टाइम. 2 readings with first fast reading and second slow reading plus notes takes less time. ये तो मैंने personally experimented, right? So newspaper में ये टेक्निक तो आप definitely लगा सकते हो. प्रॉब्लम क्या आती है with hard working students like you and me? 6 महीने हो गए, 1 book I am not able to complete. That leads to very low confidence, especially with notes, कि मैं short notes भी first reading में ही बना लूंगा, राइट. हमने भी ऐसे ही किया था. एंड इतना फ्रस्ट्रेशन कि यार ये सोचा था किताब 10 दिन में रिवाइज कर लेंगे, हो ही नहीं रही. 10 दिन में तो 3 चैप्टर हुए अगर समझ के पढ़ता हूं तो. इस वजह से ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है. इट इज़ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, स्पेशली इन बल्कि सब्जेक्ट लाइक हिस्ट्री. बल्कि मतलब जिसमें बहुत कहानियां हैं, पहले ये आया फिर वो आया, फालतू की बातें हैं. दैट यू शुड हैव अ नॉवल अप्रोच, as if you are reading a novel, as if you are reading a boring bestseller, right? First reading, right? जितनी readings लगाओ, ठीक है. अगर आपने 2 first readings novel की लगा लेना, even better. Third reading में slow start करो, and your mind will be at different level, right? By third, but पहली 2 readings time नहीं लेना चाहिए, तो उसको novel की तरह पढ़ो. Don't try to be a perfectionist in the first reading itself. तब आपको पता है. दो स्टूडेंट्स हु हैव स्टडीड फ्रॉम मी राइट नाउ, यू वुड बी हैविंग चैलेंज ऑफ रिवाइजिंग हिस्ट्री, है ना. सर वो हैंड आउट दे रखे हैं, हैंड आउट खोले अभी तक? तुमने खोले? उनको पढ़ो ऐसे, पहले साइकोलॉजिकल कॉन्फिडेंस लेके आओ कि पढ़ दिए पूरे, ठीक है ना, पूरा ऐसा पढ़ दिए. एक कॉन्फिडेंस आता है यार, मैं 300 पेज पढ़ दिए यार, राइट. इन सेकेंड यू डिसाइड कि वेदर दिस सब्जेक्ट इज वर्दी इनफ टू कन्वर्ट इनटू शॉर्ट नोट्स, या फिर इसमें यार रीडिंग ही चल जाएगी. डिपेंड्स ना कैसा सब्जेक्ट है, ठीक है ना. डेफिनेटली मेक शॉर्ट नोट्स इन वीक सब्जेक्ट्स और स्ट्रॉन्ग सब्जेक्ट्स. स्ट्रॉन्ग सब्जेक्ट्स मैडम, यूपीएससी में इफ यू interact with toppers and you calculate their marks, those who got 48% marks are already rank 1. 48%. So therefore UPSC is about being Saurav Ganguly. That is, whenever the ball is either spin or an off stump, it has to go for 4 or 6. And whenever it is bouncer, then just don't get out. Just stay average. Don't try to be Bumrah. yesterday match, Bumrah was playing well, उड़ा दिया फिर, ठीक है, फालतू में, है ना? You are not, it is not your skill set, right? You are a batsman, so there you do only tuk.
The moment to test yourself before UPSC does is here. Introducing ABHYAAS Mains 2025 by Vision IAS, conducted simultaneously in 35 plus cities across India. ABHYAAS lets you experience the real UPSC mains environment wherever you are. If you are writing Mains 2025, this is your opportunity to experience the exam hall atmosphere in advance, assess your readiness under real conditions, identify and bridge critical gaps in your preparation. Why choose ABHYAAS Mains 2025? All India percentile to benchmark your performance, expert evaluation with actionable feedback, post-test discussions to enhance your approach, closely aligned with UPSC's pattern and difficulty level, comprehensive coverage of all mains components, GS Paper 1, 2, 3 and 4, Essay, Optional Papers 1 and 2, available in English and Hindi. Test schedule: 26th July, GS Paper 1 and 2, 27th July, GS Paper 3 and 4, 2nd August, Essay, 3rd August, Optional Paper 1 and 2. Toppers have trusted ABHYAAS year after year to sharpen their writing, refine their strategies and gain the confidence to excel, inspiring thousands of aspirants to follow their path to top ranks. Now it's your turn to rise to the challenge. Don't just prepare, rehearse, improve and excel with ABHYAAS Mains 2025. Take this decisive step towards your UPSC success. To know more or register, visit our website or call us on the given numbers.
Struggling to find the right guidance amid UPSC's vast syllabus? Lakshya Integrated Mentoring Program 2026 is your complete solution offering personalized one-on-one mentorship, complete syllabus coverage including GS, CSAT, Essay, Ethics and Current Affairs, plus expert interview guidance with mock interviews. Stay ahead with performance analytics for targeted improvement and daily current affairs updates to keep you motivated and informed. Our phase-wise plan ensures steady progress. Integrated revision and practice phase. 2,600 plus MCQs, 25,000 plus Sandhan questions, and 500 plus subjective questions for a strong foundation. Mains exclusive phase. 120 plus subjective questions including ethics and 10 plus essay topics for mains clarity. Prelims intensive phase. 2,000 plus MCQs daily weekly, plus 25,000 plus Sandhan questions for prelims mastery. Mains intensive phase. 200 plus subjective questions to perfect your mains answers. Total daily questions. Prelims MCQs. 30,000 plus. Mains questions. 800 plus. Test papers. Weekly Lakshya practice tests, prelims and mains. 80 plus. Full-length tests, 25 plus. All phases prelims, mains and interview preparation start from 2nd July. Hindi and English. Enroll now in Lakshya Integrated Mentoring Program 2026 and prepare smart for your UPSC success. PSC Mains is not just about writing answers. It's about writing impactfully with clarity, depth, and precision. And that calls for more than knowledge. It calls for mentorship. Presenting the Vision IAS Mains Mentoring Program 2025. Starting from 15th July. A purpose-built initiative to guide serious aspirants through one of the most demanding phases of the civil services examination. This program is designed to help you evolve from just writing answers to writing answers that fetch marks. What does the Lakshya Mains Mentoring Program offer? Personalized mentoring, regular one-on-one sessions to fine-tune your strengths and overcome weaknesses. Structured daily and weekly targets to keep you consistent and exam-ready. Advanced answer writing sessions with model solutions and detailed evaluation. Essay mentoring and practice for developing impactful content and structure. Paper-wise strategic sessions including GS and essay. Feedback, review and continuous monitoring for real-time improvement. Whether you're stepping into mains for the first time or returning with renewed focus, this is the push that converts effort into excellence.
Right? You just don't get out. Right? That is how it is. Therefore, wherever you feel, agar modern history chamak raha hai, economics chamak raha hai, wherever you feel that this thing is, I'm having a knack for it, there you become total awesome. There you make short notes, plus you make ultra short notes. And wherever after effort also, you feel, yaar, this is just not my cup of tea, there you reduce your time also. Okay? So that whenever question will come from your favorite subjects, write. Whenever question comes from your weak subjects, if question is easy, then you attempt, otherwise leave it. You will definitely get selection in prelims. And you have to ensure for overall selection that your optional and your ethics, 750 marks, they are on the off side or spin side only. That means they have to be awesome, right? So therefore, don't choose optional under pressure. Always go for such an optional where you feel you know it, irrespective of what the trend is. Because you have to ace it. वहाँ पे rote learning चल ही नहीं सकती in optional, right? Last advice, once you have, अभी तो as per coaching you do, revision wise क्या करना चाहिए? Remember this formula. Simple logical है, पर करते हम reverse हैं, right? Weak first and strong later. क्यों? Let's say my weak subject was art and culture and geography. If I start revising them 20 days before exam or 30 days before exam, what am I doing? A, I'm anxious that exam is close, I need to do it quickly. That means I'm not studying those subjects which are weak with peace of mind, which is very important to understand them. Second, most probably, तब नहीं समझ में आया तो अब क्या खाक समझ में आ जाएगा? Therefore, just before the exam, I'm reducing my confidence. Every day I'm telling myself, I'm a bad student. I'm a bad student. देखो पढ़ा नहीं समझ में आया. I'm a bad student. And confidence is of very high importance in prelims also and in mains also. Right? However, if I study week first, then I have time. कोई नहीं, मुश्किल सब्जेक्ट में समय ज़्यादा लगता है ना, तो लगता है हाँ अभी तो 5 महीने बाद है यार प्रीलिम्स, ठीक है कोई नहीं, एक दिन एक्स्ट्रा दे देता हूँ, ठीक. प्लस व्हेन यू डूइंग स्ट्रॉन्ग लेटर, अब लेटर का मतलब ये नहीं कि स्ट्रॉन्ग है बट 20 दिन पहले स्टार्ट कर रहे हो. इट्स अबाउट प्रोपोर्शन. माने कि 70%, लेट्स से यू आर 6 months बिफोर द एग्जाम और 10 months बिफोर, तो 70% ये पढ़ रहे हो, 30% ये पढ़ रहे हो. एंड जैसे जैसे एग्जाम के क्लोज आ रहे हो, यू आर इंक्रीजिंग द प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ दिस एंड रिड्यूसिंग द प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ दिस, so that closer to exam you are reading stronger subjects, right? So therefore सौरभ गांगुली हो बट नेट में प्रैक्टिस तो करते हो ना ऑफ साइड की भी, राइट? सो देयरफॉर यू आर क्लोजर टू द एग्जाम, यू आर टोटली थोरो, बिकॉज एग्जाम में रिजल्ट तो बाद में आएगा. पहला दुख इस चीज का होगा कि यार पॉलिटी मेरा फेवरेट सब्जेक्ट था, उसी से मेरे क्वेश्चन गलत हो गए, क्या मेरा हो गया यार यूपीएससी, छोड़ो यार. स्ट्रॉन्ग सब्जेक्ट का क्वेश्चन गलत होना बहुत ज्यादा दुख देता है, बिकॉज वो आपके कॉन्फिडेंस को खत्म कर देता है. यार कहाँ से होगा, मैं तो सोचा था मेरा इकोनॉमिक्स अच्छा है, उसी में मेरे 5 क्वेश्चन गलत हो गए 10 में से, राइट? इट लीड्स टू डिप्रेशन, राइट? सो देयरफॉर क्लोजर टू द एग्जाम स्ट्रॉन्गर सब्जेक्ट्स, फार्दर अवे फ्रॉम द एग्जाम वीकर सब्जेक्ट्स, राइट? ये आपका स्ट्रैटेजी होना चाहिए. स्ट्रॉन्गर सब्जेक्ट्स में ज्यादा एफर्ट, क्योंकि उसको टॉप बनाना है, ठीक है? वीकर सब्जेक्ट समझ आ जाएगा, फर्स्ट मारोगे सेकंड मारोगे तो एक लगता है यार पता नहीं यार ये ना, मैं एफर्ट भी मार लिया बहुत कुछ बट ये नहीं है, ये है ही नहीं यार, तो उसमें फिर हाईलाइट पे रुक जाओ. किताब है, हाईलाइट है, ठीक है? कुछ सिंपल से अगर नोट्स बन पा रहे हैं ओके, बट अगर सब्जेक्ट चमक रहा है, दैट इज इट इज टर्निंग आउट टू बी ऑसम, देन उसमें बिल्कुल मस्त होना चाहिए तुम्हारे पास. 100 पेज के नोट्स ओरिजिनल है, एक तुम्हारे पास होना चाहिए 60 पेजर, और एक तुम्हारे पास है 20 पेजर, राइट? 60 पेजर कब काम आएगा? जब when 3 months have gone by and you have not touched that subject, This 60 pager has all the information, okay, but is still lesser, okay, because flow chart based है. 20 वाला कब काम आएगा? जब एग्जाम में 10 दिन पेंडिंग है, राइट? ट्रस्ट मी, विदाउट नोट्स इट इज वेरी टफ टू क्वालिफाई यूपीएससी, बिकॉज कितनी तेज पढ़ लोगे? दिस मच इज दी बुक्स, राइट? विदाउट शॉर्ट नोट्स हाउ? एंड विदाउट अंडरस्टैंडिंग यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू रिमेंबर, राइट? ऐसा तो ये चीज़ें मतलब फोकस करो मेरे हिसाब से. दैट इज मच मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट विद रिस्पेक्ट टू हाउ टू अप्रोच हिस्ट्री और फॉर दैट मैटर एनी सब्जेक्ट, राइट? तो ये चीज़ें हैं. आपका कोई डाउट है तो आई कैन आंसर, अदरवाइज माई सेशन इज एंडेड. नहीं, 100 पेज इज द बुक विच यू रेड, राइट? You do 3 readings of the books. First reading very fast. First reading, simply read like novel. Second reading, take out highlighter, right? Third reading, by this point of time you would have understood, should I go for notes or should I limit it to highlights, right? If you feel that this is subject कि यार बहुत अच्छे से समझ में आ गया है, अब नोट्स भी बना लूँ ना तो मतलब याद भी अच्छे से हो जाएगा और मतलब ना थोड़ी जो कन्फ्यूजन है वो भी चली जाएंगी, है ना? तब फ्लो चार्ट बेस्ड नोट्स, और जो आपके फ्लो चार्ट बेस्ड नोट्स हैं वो है 60 पेजर, जहाँ पे आप क्या फोकस कर रहे हो कि मेरे ये नोट्स ऐसे हैं कि अब इस बुक को मैं अलमारी में रख दूंगी, है ना? तो उससे क्या है कि फिर मैं जब भी फ्यूचर में इसको रिवाइज करूंगी मेरा 40% टाइम बच रहा है ना, ठीक है? टाइम इज ऑफ एसेंस. एंड बाद में जब भी मौका मिले यू कैन मेक दिस 20 पेजर नोट्स. एक और चीज़ आप क्या कर सकते हो आपके टाइम्स में, जो PYQs, whichever PYQs that you attempt, उसमें टाइम दो, आंसर तो लिखो ही, बट बिफोर द आंसर मेक प्रॉपर फ्लो चार्ट ऑफ द आंसर. दिस विल सर्व एज वेरी एडवांस. हाँ, ये आप कर सकते हो वीक सब्जेक्ट्स में जहां पे लग रहा है यार टाइम नहीं है एंड आई एम नॉट एबल टू डू दिस प्रॉपर नोट्स मेकिंग. कुछ मत करो, पिछले 10 साल के जो PYQs हैं, ठीक, उनके प्रॉपर फ्लो, उनके आंसर्स के प्रॉपर फ्लो चार्ट बेस्ड नोट्स बना लो ऑफ मीन्स, राइट? तो पिछले 10 साल के अगर तुम्हारे पास ये है, दिस इज उसमें सारा सिलेबस हो जाएगा यार. थिंक ऑफ देम लाइक एडवांस नोट्स ऑफ द होल सिलेबस. 15 साल के कर लो, एक कॉन्फिडेंस होगा. आई हैव डन 15 years ऑफ PYQ प्लस आई हैव देयर शॉर्ट नोट्स विद देम. और बहाना क्या था? टेस्ट सीरीज ज्वाइन किया था. जो भी टेस्ट सीरीज ज्वाइन करो उसके आंसर के 5 ही मिनट एक्स्ट्रा लगेंगे, क्योंकि आंसर यू योरसेल्फ हैव रिटन, ठीक है? 5 ही मिनट एक्स्ट्रा लगेंगे जब उसका वो आए, ठीक है? मतलब व्हेन यू गेट मार्क्स, राइट? तुम्हें लग रहा है अच्छा कोचिंग ने आंसर दिया, ये वाले पॉइंट्स थे. कोचिंग आंसर और अपना आंसर मिला के क्विकली इफ यू कैन मेक अ फ्लो चार्ट, राइट? एंड उसको स्टोर करके रखो, दैट विल बी यूज्ड बिफोर मेंस फॉर रिवीजन, ठीक है ना? तो 15 ईयर PYQ के आंसर्स के अपने बनाए फ्लो चार्ट्स अगर तुम रिवाइज कर लें, इसका मतलब सब्जेक्ट तुम्हारा रिवाइज होगा, क्विक रिवीजन, राइट? रिवीजन के लिए टारगेटेड रिवीजन करो. आफ्टर अ पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम यू आर लाइक अभी 300 पेज दोबारा कौन पढ़ेगा, और शॉर्ट नोट्स भी नहीं बनाए, लेट्स से ऐसी सिचुएशन में फंस गए. तो क्या करना है? प्रीलिम्स के क्वेश्चंस अटेम्प्ट करो, जो क्वेश्चन गलत हुए उन टॉपिक्स को जाके रिवाइज करो और देखो कि मेरा ये क्वेश्चन क्यों गलत हुआ और कैसे ठीक हो जाता. फिर नेक्स्ट टेस्ट, जो क्वेश्चन सही हो गए वो तो खुद ही रिवाइज हो गए, और जो क्वेश्चन गलत हुए वो जाके रिवाइज करें. इससे एक मोटिवेशन आती है. क्यों? क्योंकि पूरी लक्ष्मीकांत कौन दोबारा पढ़ेगा यार. हाँ, टेस्ट लगा लेता हूँ 1 घंटे का, उस टेस्ट में 30% क्वेश्चंस गलत हुए तो पता चल गया मेरे कौन से टॉपिक्स वीक हैं. यूज टेस्ट एज फीडबैक कि भाई हेयर इज द पेन, रिलीव द पेन, मूव अहेड. ऐसे अगर तुमने 30-40 टेस्ट लगा लिए प्रीलिम्स के, राइट, विद टारगेटेड रिवीजन फॉर द रॉन्ग क्वेश्चंस, हो गया रिवीजन. ऑलवेज ट्राई टू गो फॉर एक पंथ दो काज, मतलब यू आर ट्राइंग फॉर वन थिंग बट उससे मल्टीपल रिजल्ट्स आ रहे हैं. यस, while we read. Because they are written in a very tough manner, they are not written in a very good manner. That yes, that is why 2 things are there. That's why you should definitely, matlab, I had the option of taking coaching. I had taken coaching for optionals, right? That's why I could not take coaching for general studies, right? Had there been such scenario that I can take only geography and art and culture and ancient, right, coaching, so I would have definitely gone for that kind of package by the industry as a student in my time, right? So therefore coaching becomes extremely important with respect to subjects like ancient, medieval, and art and culture, and also science and technology if you're not from tech background, right? Why? Because there the teacher is going to then make sense to you that see this is this, see this is this, right? But books are not written like that. Second thing that you can do is you can use AI now. That is, ask your very simple questions which pop up in your mind, right? You simply write down, I'm not from dancing background and I'm studying about Bharatanatyam versus Kathakali. I'm not able to understand the difference. Please tell me in simple language. AI बता देगा. मैंने तो इतनी फाइट मारी थी. I used to watch videos. उधर कथकली चल रहा है, इधर भरतनाट्यम. बट मुझे तब भी समझ में नहीं आया कि ये मुद्रा ऐसे क्यों होती है, ऐसे क्यों होती है, मुझे नहीं समझ में आया. ठीक है, सबकी अपनी कैपेबिलिटीज होती है, मेरी कैपेबिलिटी होती है. सो AI टीचर फर्स्ट, एंड जो टीचर भी ना समझा सके, देयर योर स्टूपिड क्वेश्चन, नो क्वेश्चन इज स्टूपिड, योर आस्क योर स्टूपिड क्वेश्चंस टू सम पेड वर्जन ऑफ AI which can give you answer in your layman terms, right? So therefore this is how you should. ठीक है, तो अभी मैं खत्म करता हूँ, नहीं तो नेक्स्ट वाले टीचर वेट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, चलो टेक केयर.